There is a specific category of horror story that does not begin with someone going somewhere they shouldn't. It begins with someone finding something that was deliberately placed where no one would look. And then the thing that was hidden starts doing what it was always doing before someone found it and interrupted it. And the horror is not what the thing is. The horror is the realization that it was active the entire time it was hidden. Operating in the dark, in the sealed room, in the locked cabinet, in the forgotten archive, performing its function with no audience and no witness. And it did not need you. It did not want you. And now that you have found it, it knows you are there. And the dynamic that kept it contained, the fact that no one was watching, has been reversed. And you are now the one being watched, and the thing that was hidden is no longer hidden. But it has not changed its behavior. It has not become more active or more aggressive or more dangerous. It is doing exactly what it was doing before you found it. The only thing that has changed is that you now know about it, and that knowledge is the threat. Not the thing itself, because the thing was always there, always running, always real, and you were the one who was ignorant, and now you are not. And that shift from ignorance to knowledge is the single most terrifying transition a human being can make. And every single one of the 10 accounts you are about to hear was found by someone who made that transition, and not one of them is better off for having made it. Welcome to True Terror Files Official. Tonight, you will hear 10 accounts that were found, not invented. It's not adapted, not imagined. Found in the literal archaeological sense of that word. Extracted from the sediment of institutional silence, where they had been resting undisturbed. Each one placed there by someone who understood that the account was safer buried than broadcast. You will hear about a postal carrier who discovered that a house on her route had been receiving mail addressed to residents who had not yet moved in, including letters dated from the future, written in handwriting she recognized as her own. A museum conservator who found a painting in a sealed storage vault that depicted an event that would not occur for another 11 years. Painted in a style and medium that did not exist in the period when the painting was allegedly created. A subway tunnel inspector who discovered a section of track that appeared on no transit map and led to a station that had never been built. With passengers waiting on the platform who were wearing clothing from a decade that had not yet arrived. A veterinary pathologist who found an organism inside a domestic animal that did not correspond to any known parasite, symbiote, or biological agent, and that was still alive and growing in the formalin-preserved tissue sample where it should have been dead. A structural engineer who found a load-bearing wall in a 100-year-old building that was not, supporting the structure above it but was containing something behind it, and the wall was warm. And it was vibrating, and it had been doing both since the building was constructed. A school district archivist who found a set of enrollment records for children who did not exist yet, with photographs attached that showed the faces of students who would not be born for another 15 to 20 years. A deep-sea cable technician who pulled a section of retired transatlantic communication cable from the ocean floor and discovered that the cable was still transmitting a signal, a voice, speaking continuously in a language that no linguist could identify. A signal that had been running since the cable was laid in 1928 and had never been connected to any known communication system. A county surveyor who found a property boundary marker that had been moving, not shifting with the land, but moving with intention, repositioning itself by centimeters each year to slowly expand the territory of a single parcel of land that no living person owned. A pharmaceutical quality control analyst who discovered that a batch of medication sealed in a warehouse since 1962 was still metabolically active. The pills were alive, changing their chemical composition month by month, adapting, evolving, as though they were an organism that had been sealed in amber and was still growing. And a National Weather Service meteorologist who found archived satellite imagery from 1987 showing a storm system that was not natural. Its cloud formation moved against the prevailing wind. Its rotation was reversed. And at the center of the system was a shape that was not a weather phenomenon, but a structure. Something built into the atmosphere, hovering, rotating, waiting. 10 accounts, 10 discoveries, 10 things that were never supposed to be found. If you are new here, True Terror Files official posts every single night. Something is always waiting in the archive. Tonight, 10 people found what was hidden. Let's begin. Petra Voss was 37 years old and had been a United States Postal Service city carrier for 9 years when she noticed the house on Delancey Street, Route 14, Stop 37, a modest 2-story clapboard at the end of a cul-de-sac that she had been delivering to for the entire duration of her career, and which had been unoccupied for the last 3 years since the previous owner. An elderly woman named Margaret Cullen had passed away, and the property had entered probate, and then estate limbo with no identified heir and no active listing. And during those 3 years, Petra had delivered no mail to 413 at Delancey because no one lived there, and no forwarding order had been filed, and the mailbox had been empty every day. Until the Tuesday in March, when she opened the mailbox and found 6 letters inside, already inside, as though someone had placed them there before her arrival. Which was impossible, because the house was locked and the mailbox was at the curb, and Petra was the only person who interacted with it. She pulled the letters out and examined them, and they were addressed to 6 different names she did not recognize. Each one formatted as a standard residential delivery with the full address, including the zip code. And the postmarks on the letters were dated across a range of dates from March 2026 through August 2029, which was 3 years into the future from the current date. And Petra assumed the letters had been misdelivered or placed in the wrong box, and she collected them to return to the post office for correction. And at the post office, the supervisor examined the letters and noted that the postage was current and valid. The barcodes were scannable, the addresses were correctly formatted, and the names, when he ran them through the change of address database, returned no results, because the names did not exist in any USPS customer record, which meant the letters had been processed through the system without any corresponding sender or recipient account, which was technically impossible, and he told Petra to log them as anomalous returns and continue her route. And Petra delivered to 413 Delancey the next day, and the mailbox contained 4 more letters, the next day 3 more, and the next day 5. And each batch was addressed to different names with postmarks from different future dates. And on the 8th day, Petra opened one of the letters she was not supposed to. It was a federal offense, but the names on the envelopes had started to feel familiar, and she could not identify why in the letter. Inside was handwritten in a script she recognized immediately because it was her own handwriting. Her own specific way of forming the letter P and crossing the T and looping the L. And the letter was dated June 2028, and it was addressed to someone named David Marchetti, and it said, "David, I know you haven't moved in yet, but I've been delivering to this house for years, and I need you to know what's inside the wall in the upstairs bedroom. Don't open it. Don't let anyone open it. Seal it. I've been writing these letters and leaving them in the mailbox, and somehow they are going backward. They are arriving before I write them, and I don't know if the house is sending them or if I am. But the thing in the wall has been there since the house was built, and it is the reason no one stays." And it is the reason Margaret Cullen died in that room, and it is the reason you will hear sounds from inside the wall at night, and you must not open the wall. Petra in the letter was in her own hand and was dated 2 years in the future, and it referenced events she had not yet experienced, including the name of a person who did not yet live at that address, and the death of the previous owner in a specific room. And Petra sat in her postal vehicle in front of 413 Delancey with the letter in her hand, and the mailbox was still full. And she understood that the house was not receiving mail from the future, it was generating mail, producing letters that had not yet been written by people who had not yet written them, and placing them in the mailbox for her to find. And the letters were going backward through time, arriving before they were sent, which meant that someone in the future was writing them, and someone in the present was finding them. And Petra was the link. She was the carrier. She was the person who moved the letters from the mailbox to the world. And she had been doing it for 8 days, without knowing that each letter she removed and processed and delivered to the post office was a message from a future version of herself to a future version of someone else. And the future version of herself was trying to warn someone about something inside the wall of the house on Delancey Street. Petra drove to the house and looked up at the second floor window of the bedroom on the left side of the facade, and the curtain moved. Not from wind, not from draft, but from something inside the room that was not a person yet, but was already making its presence known to the people who would eventually live there. And she drove away and returned the next day, and the mailbox was empty for the first time since the letters began, and it has been empty every day since. But Petra keeps the letter she opened in her jacket pocket, and she reads it every morning before her route, and she has started writing letters of her own, to the same names, at the same address, and placing them in the mailbox at 413 Delancey. And she does not know if the letters are going forward or backward or both. And she does not know if the David Marchetti from the letter is real or will be real. And she does not know what is in the wall, but she knows that someone wrote to warn him. And that someone was her, and the letter was never supposed to be found. And she found it, and now she is the one writing them. And the house is still empty, and the wall is still warm. Yuki Tanaka was 29 years old and a paintings conservator at the Harlan Museum of Art, a position that involved examining, cleaning, stabilizing, and documenting works from the museum's permanent collection. And she was assigned to process Vault 14, a sealed storage area in the museum's basement that had been locked since 1994, when the previous director had ordered its closure for a collection reorganization that was never completed. And the vault contained 43 crates of unprocessed artworks. And Yuki opened crate number 27 on a Wednesday in November and found a painting on a standard linen canvas, 36 by 48 inches, unframed, depicting an interior scene of a modern commercial building, a glass and steel atrium with a central escalator bank and multiple levels of open plan. Offices visible through transparent partition walls, and the painting showed a specific moment. A section of the building's glass curtain wall was collapsing inward in a cascade of shattered panels. And figures on the ground floor were reacting, some running, some covering their heads. One figure standing motionless directly beneath the falling glass with arms at their sides, and the style was photorealistic, executed with a precision and technical mastery that Yuki recognized as exceptional. And the medium was unusual, not traditional oil or acrylic, but a polymer-based paint that Yuki had never encountered in a work of this age. And she checked the crate's accession tag. And the painting was cataloged as Untitled, Artist Unknown, Date Unknown. acquired 1971, and the acquisition record showed it had been donated by an estate liquidation firm with no information about the artist or origin. And Yuki examined the painting under ultraviolet light and found no retouching or alteration. The work was entirely original and had not been modified since its creation, and under magnification the polymer medium was consistent with materials that were not commercially available until the late 1990s. Which meant the painting was created no earlier than the late 1990s, but had been in the museum's collection since 1971, which was impossible. And Yuki photographed the painting and began researching the building it depicted. She found it, the Meridian Tower, a commercial office building in a Midwestern city that had been constructed in 2004. And the atrium in the painting matched the Meridian Tower's lobby, exactly the escalator configuration, the partition layout, the structural column positions. And the curtain wall failure depicted in the painting showed a specific section of the building's east facade. And Yuki searched news archives for any report of a glass failure at Meridian Tower and found nothing. No incident, no failure, no collapse. And she sat with the painting for a long time and then noticed a detail she had initially overlooked. Out in the lower right corner of the painting, on the ground floor near the escalator, there was a small figure in a dark jacket holding a phone to their ear. And the figure's face was turned slightly toward the viewer, and the face was hers. Unmistakably hers. Her bone structure, her hair, the small scar on her left temple from a childhood fall, depicted in a photorealistic painting that had been in a sealed vault since 1994. When she was 1 year old, and Yuki Tanaka stared at her own face on a canvas that predated her existence, and she thought about the polymer medium that didn't exist in 1971, and the building that didn't exist until 2004, and the event that hadn't happened yet. And she called the Meridian Tower's property management office and asked if there were any planned renovations or maintenance on the east curtain wall, and the manager said yes, actually. The east facade is scheduled for panel replacement next month. Yuki said, "What floor are the panels on?" The manager said, "Floors 1 through 6. And Yuki said, "Has anyone checked the structural integrity of the attachment hardware?" And there was a pause, and the manager said, "Why would you ask that?" And Yuki said, "Because I have a painting that shows those panels falling." The manager hung up. And 3 weeks later, the Meridian Tower's east curtain wall failed during a routine panel replacement when a gust of wind caught an unsecured section, and the glass cascaded inward across 6 floors in exactly the configuration depicted in the painting. And one person stood motionless beneath the falling glass and was struck and killed. And Yuki read the news report. And the victim's name was not hers. The person standing beneath the glass was a maintenance worker named Carl Bentz. But in the photograph accompanying the news story, standing on the ground floor near the escalator with a phone to her ear, was a woman in a dark jacket. And Yuki looked at the photograph, and then at the painting, and then at the photograph again, and the woman in the photograph was not her. It was a different person, but the woman in the painting was her. And the painting had shown her in a position that she would occupy at the moment of the event, and the event had happened, and she had not been there. But the painting said she would be, and the painting was made before she was born. And the painting was never supposed to be found, and she found it. Now she knows where she is supposed to be standing when the next one happens. Marco DeLuca was 42 years old and a tunnel structure inspector for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, position that required him to walk the underground corridors of the city's subway system examining tunnel walls, track beds, drainage systems, and structural supports for deterioration. a job performed on foot in the spaces between stations where no passengers ever go. And on a night in January, he was inspecting the northbound tunnel between the Chestnut and Ridgeline stations on the Orange Line, a section of tunnel that was approximately 1.2 miles long and contained no intermediate stations. And he was walking the track bed with his inspection light and measuring tools when he reached the halfway point and the tunnel changed. The tile walls gave way to a different material. A smooth concrete finish with a color that was not standard for any MTA station, and the tunnel widened, and there were platform edges on both sides, and there was a station, a full station, with tiled walls and benches and lighting and signage. And the signage read Halsey and the MTA's standard typeface and color scheme. Marco stopped walking because there was no Halsey station on the Orange Line. There had never been a Halsey station on any transit map he had ever seen. And the station was lit. The overhead fluorescents were on and functioning, and there were people on the platform. Approximately 20 people, standing and sitting in the postures of waiting passengers. And Marco approached the platform edge, and the people did not look at him. And they were wearing clothing that Marco registered as wrong. Not wrong in the sense of inappropriate, but wrong, the sense of anachronistic, the kind of clothing that would be fashionable in a decade that had not yet arrived. Fabrics and cuts and accessories that did not correspond to any current fashion. And one of the people on the platform, a young woman standing near the bench, was holding a newspaper. And Marco could see the date on the masthead. It was a date 11 years in the future, and the headlines described events he had not yet heard of. And the woman turned a page and continued reading, and did not acknowledge Marco's presence on the track bed. And no one on the platform acknowledged him, and he walked the length of the station and found the emergency exits locked and the station. Manager's booth empty, and the turnstiles configured in a pattern that the MTA had not used since the 1990s. And at the far end of the platform, the tunnel resumed its standard configuration, and he continued to the Ridgeline station and climbed to the surface and filed his inspection report, and did not mention Halsey Station because he needed to understand what he had seen before he reported it. And he returned the following night, and the station was there again, with different people and different clothing from the same future period. And the newspaper on the bench was a different paper with a different date from the same future year. And he took photographs with his phone, and the photographs showed an empty platform, no people. No newspapers, just tiles and benches and fluorescent lights and the Halsey sign. And he returned a third time, and this time he stepped onto the platform and crossed the threshold from the track bed onto the tiled surface. And the air temperature changed, and the sounds of the tunnel behind him stopped, and the people on the platform turned and looked at him, all of them, simultaneously with the same expression, not hostility, not surprise, but recognition, the specific expression of people who have been waiting for someone, and that person has arrived. And Marco stepped back onto the track bed, and the people turned away and resumed their waiting, and the sounds of the tunnel returned, and he walked back to Chestnut Station and called the MTA's engineering office and asked about Halsey Station, and the engineer on the phone said there is no Halsey Station on the Orange Line, and Marco said, "I know, but there is one between Chestnut and Ridge Line," and the engineer was silent. And then said that section of tunnel was originally designed with a planned intermediate station that was cut from the construction budget in 1987 and was never built. And the station would have been called Halsey. Marco said, "It's built now," and the engineer said, "That's not possible." And Marco said, "I'm telling you it exists." And the engineer said, "I'm going to need you to come into the office tomorrow." And Marco went in, and the MTA sent a team to the tunnel between Chestnut And Ridgeline and the team walked the full 1.2 miles and found no station. No platform, no tiles, no benches, no Halsey sign. Just the standard tunnel with standard walls and a standard track bed. And Marco's employment was reviewed, and he was reassigned to a surface-level maintenance position, and the incident was documented in an internal memo as a probable structural hallucination caused by extended underground exposure. And Marco DeLuca has not been in a tunnel since, but every night when the last train runs on the Orange Line, the passengers traveling between Chestnut and Ridgeline sometimes report a brief flash of light through the windows at the midpoint of the tunnel. And the train's automated announcement system occasionally glitches at that exact point and announces a stop name that does not exist on any current route map, and the name it announces is Halsey. Dr. Nadia Say was 34 years old and a veterinary pathologist at the State Animal Health Diagnostic Laboratory, a position that involved performing necropsies and tissue analyses on animals submitted for disease surveillance and toxicology screening. She was processing a routine tissue sample from a domestic cat, liver, kidney, and intestinal sections preserved in 10% neutral buffered formalin when she noticed the anomaly on slide 7 of the intestinal series. Embedded in the submucosal tissue was a structure that she could not classify. A roughly spherical mass, approximately 200 microns in diameter, composed of cells that did not correspond to any known cell type in veterinary or human pathology. And the cells were arranged in a concentric pattern with a dense core and radiating filaments that extended into the surrounding intestinal tissue. And Nadia examined the structure under higher magnification, and the cells were alive, not preserved, not fixed, not dead as formalin preservation requires, but metabolically active, with visible intracellular movement and organelle activity that should not exist in a tissue sample that had been in formalin for 6 days. And she assumed contamination and prepared a fresh section from the same tissue block. And the structure was present again in the same location with the same cellular activity. And she prepared a third section and a fourth, and each one contained the same living organism in the same position in the same dead tissue. And Nadia ran a standard molecular identification panel on the cells, and the DNA extraction returned no matches in any database. Not GenBank, not the Veterinary Pathology Registry, not the Parasitology Reference Library. The organism's genetic material was entirely novel, containing sequences that did not correspond to any known domain of life. And Nadia documented the finding and submitted the sample to the reference laboratory for independent confirmation, and the reference laboratory reported back that their analysis found nothing. The tissue was normal. The intestinal submucosa contained no anomalous structures. The formalin had performed its function, and the tissue was dead. And Nadia re-examined her own slides, and the organism was still there, and it was still alive. And it had grown. The spherical mass was now 300 microns in diameter, and the radiating filaments had extended further into the surrounding tissue, and new filament branches had appeared that were not present in the original section. And Nadia placed the slide under continuous observation and watched the organism grow in real time, slowly and perceptibly, the way you can watch a plant grow if you are patient enough. And over the course of 48 hours, the organism doubled in size and developed a new internal structure, a hollow chamber within the dense core that pulsed with a rhythmic contraction. And Nadia measured the contraction rate, and it was 72 beats per minute, which is the resting heart rate of a healthy adult human. And the organism was beating like a human heart inside a dead cat's intestinal tissue inside a jar of formalin. Should have killed anything living. And Nadia reported the finding to the laboratory director, and the director came to her workstation and looked through the microscope and saw nothing. The tissue was dead, and the formalin was clear, and there was no organism. And Nadia looked through the same microscope, and the organism was there. The director looked again and saw nothing. And Nadia looked again, and it was there, larger now, with a second chamber forming beside the first. And she realized that the organism was only visible to her, that it was somehow keyed to her observation specifically, that it had selected her as its witness. She has continued to monitor the slide daily, and the organism has continued to grow, and it now has 4 chambers, and it beats at 72 beats per minute, and it is visible only to Nadia, and it has started to change the tissue around it, converting the dead formalin-fixed intestinal wall into something that is not dead and not formalin-fixed, and the converted tissue is pink and warm and metabolically active. And it is spreading outward from the organism's location at a rate of approximately 1 millimeter per day. And Nadia has not told anyone about the growth, because the last time she told someone they could not see it, and the time before that she was told she was mistaken, and the time before that she was told too. Rest in the organism continues to grow, and the tissue around it continues to revive, and the formalin in the jar has started to change color from clear to a faint amber that is getting darker. And Nadia Assay sits at her microscope every evening after the lab closes and watches something that should not be alive continue to live, and something that should not be growing continue to grow. And she has started to feel a rhythm in her own chest that matches the organism's pulse exactly, 72 beats per minute, synchronized. As though the organism is not just growing in the tissue, but is establishing a connection with the person who can see it. And Nadia has decided that the organism was not inside the cat by accident, and it was not preserved by accident, and it was not found by accident. It was placed there, in a tissue sample that would eventually reach a pathologist who would look closely enough to see it. And it was waiting to be seen. And now it has been seen. And it is growing. And it is connected to her. And she does not know what it will be when it finishes growing, but she knows it will finish. Because things that grow do not stop growing just because you want them to. And this thing has been growing in formalin without nutrients, without oxygen, without any biological input, and it has not stopped. And Nadia Say is a pathologist, and she knows what living things do, and she knows what dead things do, and she does not have a category for something that does what this thing is doing, which is growing toward her beat by beat, day by day. And the only thing she is certain of is that the sample was never supposed to be found, and she found it, and now it is finding her. Gerald Fisk was 55 years old and a structural engineer specializing in historic building assessment, and he had been hired by the city to evaluate the Calverton School, a public elementary school built in 1924 that had been closed in 2019 and was slated for demolition to make way for a municipal parking structure. And his job was to assess the building's structural condition and identify any hazardous materials before the demolition crew began work. And he worked through the building methodically, the foundation, the roof, the floor joists, the exterior walls, and everything was consistent with a 100-year-old building that had been maintained irregularly and was in expected decline. And on the 3rd day of his assessment, he reached the interior of the 2nd floor and measured the east wall of room 204, a load-bearing wall that ran the full length of the building's east side. His instruments returned readings that made no sense. The wall was warm, not ambient building temperature, but significantly warm. 37 degrees Celsius, which is human body temperature. And the wall was vibrating at a frequency of approximately 12 hertz, which is below the threshold of human hearing, but detectable with the accelerometers he used for structural assessment. And the wall had been warm and vibrating since he began measuring it, and it was warm and vibrating at the same rate every time he checked. And Gerald assumed a steam pipe or electrical conduit was running through the wall cavity and causing the heat and vibration. And he requested the building's original mechanical drawings from the city archives, and the drawings showed no pipes, no conduit, no mechanical systems of any kind running through the east wall of room 204. And the wall was designated on the drawings as a solid masonry partition with a cavity depth of 12 inches filled with brick and mortar. And Gerald drilled a small inspection hole into the wall to insert a borescope camera, and the drill bit entered the masonry, and then passed through it into the cavity, and the cavity was empty. No brick, no mortar, no fill. And it was warm inside, and the air that came out of the inspection hole smelled like breath, specifically like human breath, the exhalation of a living person. Warm and moist and organic, and Gerald inserted the borescope, and the camera transmitted an image of the interior of the wall cavity, and the cavity was not empty. It contained something, and the something was moving, slowly, rhythmically, expanding and contracting at a rate of approximately 12 cycles per minute. And the surface of the thing was pink and moist and textured like tissue, like living tissue, like the inside of a body. And Gerald pulled the borescope out, and sealed the inspection hole, and walked to the far end of the wall, and drilled another hole, and the interior was the same warm, breath-scented, and filled with a living tissue-like substance that pulsed at 12 hertz. And he drilled 4 more holes along the wall's length, and every section was the same. And the wall was not a wall, it was a container. And the thing it was containing was alive, and it had been alive inside that wall since the building was constructed in 1924, and it had been warm and breathing and pulsing for 100 years behind the plaster. And the paint and the children's drawings that had been hung on it by generations of students who had no idea what was on the other side of the surface they were taping their artwork to. And Gerald reported his findings to the city, and the demolition was halted, and a structural assessment team was sent, and they measured the wall, and it was warm and it was vibrating, and they drilled their own inspection holes. And they saw what Gerald saw, and they sealed the holes, and the demolition was permanently canceled, and the Calverton School was reclassified as a hazardous structure and fenced off, and the official reason given to the public was asbestos contamination, which was a lie, because the building had been tested for asbestos and was clean. The real reason the building could not be demolished was that the east wall of room 204 was not a structural element. It was a containment vessel. And the thing inside it was alive, and it had been contained for a century, and no one knew what would happen if the wall was removed. And Gerald Fisk has since retired, and he has not been back to the Calverton School, and he has not told anyone outside the assessment team what was inside that wall. And the school stands behind its fence, and the wall is still warm, and the wall is still warm, and the wall is still worn, breathing, and the children's drawings are still hanging on the inside surface, and the thing behind them is still there, contained, waiting, growing. And the building will never be demolished because the wall that holds it is the most important structure in that city, and no one knows who built it or why or what they were building it to contain, but the wall is holding, and it has been holding for 100 years. And Gerald Fisk goes to sleep every night listening to a frequency of 12 hertz that he recorded on his phone before he left the building. A low pulse below, hearing that you feel in your chest rather than hear with your ears. And he listens to it because it is the sound of something alive inside a wall that was built to keep it there. And the sound is steady, and the wall is holding, and the thing is contained. But the wall is old, and the mortar is failing, and the city has not funded any maintenance on a building that officially does not exist anymore. Gerald wonders every night how much longer the wall can hold before the thing on the other side finally pushes through, and the children's drawings fall, and whatever has been breathing behind them for a century steps into the room. Betty Kowalski was 48 years old and the archivist for the Ridgewood Unified School District, a position she had held for 16 years. And her primary responsibility was maintaining the district's historical student records, which included enrollment files, transcripts, attendance logs, and photographs for every student who had attended Ridgewood schools since 1952. When the district was consolidated, and the records were stored in the district office basement in row after row of file cabinets organized by school year, and Betty was conducting a routine preservation audit of the 1958 to 1962 enrollment files when she discovered a file cabinet that was not on the inventory, a standard 4-drawer steel cabinet at the end of row 17, with no label and no corresponding entry in the archive's master list. And she opened the top drawer and found enrollment records. Standard format with student names, dates of birth, parent or guardian information, home addresses, and a small black and white photograph clipped to each file. And the records were organized by school year beginning with 2028 and continuing through 2043. And Betty stared at the dates because it was currently 2026, and these were records for students who would not enroll for another 2 to 17 years, and she examined the photographs. And the faces in them were children, real children with real features, individual and distinct. Not composites or fabrications, and the home addresses on the files were real addresses within the Ridgewood district that she recognized, and the parent or guardian names were names she did not know. And the dates of birth for the earliest cohort, the 2028 enrollments, were between 2019 and 2022, which meant these were children who were currently between 4 and 7 years old, which was plausible. And she moved to the later years, and the dates of birth extended into the 2030s, which meant children who had not yet been born. And the photographs for these future students showed faces of children who could not exist yet, but whose photographs existed in a file cabinet in a school district basement in 2026. And Betty pulled 5 files at random and called the home addresses listed on the enrollment forms, and 3 of the numbers were disconnected and 2 connected to people who said they had no children and had never heard of Ridgewood Unified School District. And Betty went to one of the addresses, a house on Meridian Lane, and knocked on the door, and a woman answered, and Betty said she was from the school district and was verifying enrollment records, and the woman said she had no school-age children, and Betty showed her the photograph from the file, and the woman looked at it and said, "That looks like my daughter." And Betty said, "You don't have a daughter." And the woman said no, and then she looked at the photograph again, and her face changed, and she said, "That looks exactly like me when I was a child." And Betty looked at the woman and at the photograph, and the child in the photograph had the woman's eyes, and the woman's mouth, and the woman's specific way of holding her head. And the enrollment file listed the child's date of birth as 2031, and the parent's name as the woman's current name. And the woman was 32 years old and had no children, and was not pregnant, and had no plans to have children. and the photograph of a girl who looked like her as a child was attached to an enrollment form for a school year that was 5 years away, with a date of birth that was 5 years in the future. And Betty returned to the archive and opened the remaining drawers of the cabinet. In every drawer contained the same type of records: future enrollments, future students, future photographs, and in the bottom drawer she found a single file folder with no student name, containing a typewritten document on district letterhead that read, "These records are authentic. They were placed here by the district for the district. They are not to be removed. They are not to be discussed. The children whose faces appear in these files will enroll at the times indicated. The families who are listed will reside at the addresses shown. This is not a prediction. This is a schedule. Comply." And there was no signature and no date. And the letterhead was the current Ridgewood Unified School District letterhead with the current superintendent's name printed at the bottom. Betty closed the cabinet and locked it and walked upstairs and told no one, and returned to her regular duties. And every night she opens the cabinet and looks at the faces of children who do not exist yet, and wonders what kind of district creates a schedule for students who have not been born, and places it in a basement where someone will find it. And whether the children in those photographs know that their enrollment was arranged before they existed, and whether the woman on Meridian Lane will have a daughter in 2031 who will look exactly like she did at that age, and whether the school already knows who will sit in every desk in every classroom for the next 17 years, whether the children's first day of school has already been written down somewhere as a date on a schedule that no one is supposed to find. And Betty Kowalski found it, and now she knows that the Ridgewood School District is not educating children. It is receiving them on a schedule. The schedule was written before the children existed. The cabinet in the basement is the proof, and it was never supposed to be found. Ronan Briggs was 31 years old and a deep-sea cable technician for a marine telecommunications company that specialized in the recovery and decommissioning of retired submarine communication cables. The fiber optic and copper coaxial lines that lay on the ocean floor carrying telephone and data signals between continents. And his job involved locating sections of retired cable on the seabed, hauling them to the surface, cutting them into manageable lengths, and transporting them to shore for recycling or archival storage. And on a deployment in the North Atlantic, approximately 400 nautical miles west of the Azores, his team recovered a section of the TAT-7 cable, a transatlantic telephone cable laid in 1968 and retired in 1994. And the section they recovered was approximately 200 meters long. It was in expected condition for a cable that had rested on the ocean floor for 30 years, biofouled, corroded, and intact, and they loaded the section onto the recovery vessel, and Ronan began the standard post-recovery inspection, which involved cutting the cable at regular intervals to assess the condition of the internal conductors. And when he cut into the first section and exposed the copper coaxial core, he connected a standard signal tester to check for residual current. And the tester registered a continuous analog signal, a live signal, active and ongoing, on a cable that had been retired and disconnected from every terrestrial communication system for 30 years. And Ronan listened to the signal through the tester's audio output, and it was a voice, a single voice speaking continuously in a language he did not recognize, not a broadcast, not a recording, but a live voice, speaking in real time in a language that had no correspondence to any phrenology he could identify. And the voice was calm and rhythmic, and it did not pause. It did not breathe. It did not stop. and Ronan recorded approximately 15 minutes of the signal and sent it to the company's acoustics lab for analysis, and the lab reported that the language contained over 400 distinct phonemes, which was approximately 4 times the number found in any known human language. And the phoneme combinations produced harmonic overtones that were not achievable with standard human vocal anatomy. And the language had no pauses for respiration, which meant the voice producing it was either not breathing or was breathing through a mechanism that did not interrupt speech. And the lab's linguistic consultant stated that the language was not a known human language and was not a constructed language and was not a cipher or code applied to a known language. It was a genuine natural language, being spoken by a genuine natural speaker that was not human. And the signal had been running continuously since at least 1968 when the cable was laid. Because the TAT-7's maintenance logs from the operational period contained notations from the 1970s, describing an unidentified signal on the coaxial core that was dismissed as equipment noise. And the signal had continued through the entire operational life of the cable and through its 30-year retirement and the ocean floor, and was still running when Ronan cut into the cable on the recovery vessel. And the company's directive was to process the cable for decommissioning, which meant cutting it into sections and extracting the copper for recycling. And Ronan asked his supervisor what to do about the signal, and the supervisor said the cable is retired and the signal is an artifact, and we proceed with decommissioning. And Ronan said the signal is live, and it is a voice, and it has been speaking for 58 years, and the supervisor said it's an analog artifact on a dead cable. And we cut the cable, and Ronan said if we cut the cable, we kill the signal, and the supervisor said that's what decommissioning means. And Ronan cut the cable, and the signal stopped, and the voice stopped, and the silence that replaced it was the loudest silence Ronan had ever heard. The cable sections were processed and recycled, and the copper was sold, and the signal was gone, and no one will ever hear that voice again. And Ronan Briggs has not slept well since, because the voice on the cable was not a recording. And it was not an artifact, and it was not noise. It was a person, or something that was the functional equivalent of a person, speaking a language that no human speaks to an audience that no human could hear through a medium that no one was supposed to access. And it had been speaking for 58 years without anyone listening, and now it is silent. And Ronan does not know if the silence is better or worse than the voice, because the voice was at least evidence that something was there. And the silence is evidence of nothing except that someone cut a cable and whatever was speaking through it stopped. And Ronan has started to hear something in the silence at night. A very faint harmonic at the edge of perception, and it is not the same language. He would not recognize it if it was. But it has the same quality of a voice that does not pause to breathe, and it is getting clearer, and he does not know where it is coming from. And he does not know if the voice on the cable was the only one, or if there are more cables on more ocean floors, carrying more voices in more languages that no one speaks. And he does not know if the voice he is hearing now is the same one that was cut off, finding a new wire to speak through. And Ronan Briggs lies in bed at night and listens to a voice in the dark that should not be there. And it is speaking to him, and it has been speaking since 1968. And it will not stop, because it never stopped. It just found a new cable. Dale Purcell was 47 years old and a county surveyor for Benton County, a position he had held for 21 years, and his work involved maintaining the official property boundary markers, iron pins, concrete monuments, and brass caps that defined the legal boundaries of every parcel of land in the county. and each marker's position was recorded in the county's geodetic database with coordinates measured to sub-centimeter accuracy using GPS and total station instruments. And Dale resurveyed the same markers on a regular rotation, verifying that their positions had not shifted due to land movement, construction, or natural erosion. And it was during the 2025 resurvey of the Greenfield district that he noticed the marker for parcel 1147B, a brass cap set in concrete at the northeast corner of a 10-acre rural property. It moved not by a natural amount, the kind of millimeter drift you might see from soil settlement or frost heave, but by 42 centimeters to the west, which was a significant and legally meaningful displacement that would have required substantial physical force to achieve. And there was no evidence of tampering. The concrete was intact. The surrounding ground was undisturbed. The brass cap was unscratched, and Dale remeasured the position 3 times and confirmed the displacement and updated the database and continued his survey. And 3 months later, when he resurveyed parcel 1147B, the marker had moved again, another 41 centimeters west. And Dale was now paying specific attention because a monument that moves 83 centimeters in 3 months with no visible force acting on it is not a survey anomaly. It is a physical impossibility. And he placed a trail camera on a post near the marker and set it to record continuously. And when he reviewed the footage, the marker did not move during any recorded frame. It was stationary in every image. And when he returned to the site, the marker had moved another 39 centimeters west, and the trail camera showed nothing because the marker was moving between frames, in the 1-second intervals between exposures, or in the moments when the camera was not recording, which was never because the camera was recording continuously. And the marker was moving during the gaps that did not exist, and Dale increased the camera's frame rate to 1 exposure per second, and the marker moved between exposures and was stationary in every frame. And he added a second camera aimed at the first to verify the recording was not being tampered with. The second camera confirmed continuous recording with no gaps. And the marker moved another 37 centimeters, and Dale realized the marker was not moving in space. It was moving through time. Or rather, it was existing in positions that corresponded to different temporal states. And each position it occupied was its position at a slightly later moment. And the marker was aging, not degrading, but physically advancing along a trajectory that was slowly pulling it westward at a rate of approximately 40 centimeters per quarter. And he mapped the marker's cumulative displacement and projected it forward. And at that rate, the marker would cross the boundary of the adjacent parcel, parcel 1147C, within 5 years, effectively annexing the land between its current and original position to parcel 1147B, expanding the parcel's territory by slow incremental occupation. And Dale checked the county records for parcel 1147B, and there was no current owner. The parcel had been unwound since 1987, when the last recorded owner, a man named Oswald Greeley, had died with no heirs, and the property had reverted to the county, and Oswald Greeley's will, which Dale found in the probate archive, contained a single clause: "The land shall expand to its intended size. Do not move the marker." And the marker was moving itself, expanding the territory of a parcel owned by a dead man. Following a directive written in a will from 1987, and Dale reported the movement to the county attorney's office, and the attorney told him to resurvey and correct the position, and Dale said the marker corrects itself, and the attorney said that is not possible, and Dale said, "I have 6 months of data that says it is." And the attorney said adjust the database to reflect the current position and monitor it. And Dale has been monitoring it, and the marker has continued its westward drift, and it is now 2.3 meters from its original position. And it is accelerating. The displacement per quarter has increased from 40 centimeters to 57. And the boundary of parcel 1147C is 4.7 meters away. And the marker will reach it, and the parcel will grow. And the land will belong to a dead man's estate. And whatever is pulling that marker westward has been doing it since 1987, and it is not stopping, and it is not slowing down, and it is getting faster. And Dale Purcell drives past the marker every morning on his way to work, and it is never in the same position as the day before. And the ground around it is always undisturbed, and the concrete is always intact, and the brass cap is always clean. And the marker is always further west than it was, and Dale has started to think that Oswald Greeley knew what that marker would do when he wrote that clause in his will. And he knew because he was the one who set it in motion, and the land is expanding because Oswald Greeley wanted it to expand. And the marker is the mechanism, and the will is the instruction. And the dead man's property is growing, centimeter by centimeter, into the living world. And there's nothing Dale can do to stop it, because a surveyor cannot arrest a monument that moves itself. He can only measure how far it has gone, and report how far it is yet to go, and watch. Dr. Lena Vargas was 36 years old and a pharmaceutical quality control analyst at the Meridian Drug Products Warehouse, a facility that stored, retired, and quarantined pharmaceutical products for regulatory compliance. And her job was to conduct periodic stability testing on sealed product batches that had been held in long-term storage. Work that involved selecting random samples from sealed containers and testing their chemical composition to verify that the product had not degraded beyond acceptable limits, and she was processing a batch of tablets, Lot 77HG004, a generic analgesic manufactured in 1962 by a company that had been dissolved in 1976. When the mass spectrometry results returned something that should not have been possible. Tablets were not the same chemical compound that was listed on the manufacturing record. They had not degraded. Degradation produces simpler compounds, breakdown products, known metabolites. But these tablets contained compounds that were more complex than the original formulation. Molecular structures that were not breakdown products, but were novel constructions. New molecules that had not existed in the 1962 formula and had not been added and could not have formed through any known chemical degradation pathway. And Lena reran the test with a fresh sample from the same sealed container, and the results were the same. And she ran a third test with a sample from a different container in the same lot. And the novel compounds were present in that sample too, at slightly different concentrations. And she checked the batch's previous stability test from 2015. The last time the lot was tested, and the 2015 results showed the original formulation with no anomalous compounds, which meant the tablets had changed between 2015 and 2026. Inside sealed containers, in a climate-controlled warehouse, with no external input, and Lena opened a container and examined the tablets visually, and they looked normal, same size, same shape, same color. But when she picked one up, it was warm, not ambient warehouse temperature, but warm. And when she placed it on a glass slide under magnification, the surface of the tablet was not the smooth, compressed powder she expected. It was textured with a fine network of channels, like capillaries, and the channels were moving, slowly, with a peristaltic action. And there was fluid in the channels, and the fluid was flowing, and the tablet was alive. Not in the way a cell is alive or a tissue is alive, but in the way a simple organism is alive, with internal circulation and metabolic activity and a capacity for change, and the tablet was breathing through the channels on its surface, drawing air in and pushing it out in a rhythm so slow it was almost imperceptible. And Lena placed the tablet in a growth medium to see if it would continue to change, and it did, producing new compounds at a rate that corresponded to a doubling time of approximately 7 days. And the new compounds were increasingly complex and increasingly pharmacologically active. Not the activity of the original analgesic, but activities that corresponded to entirely different drug classes: antivirals, immunosuppressants, compounds that would not be synthesized by human pharmaceutical research for another decade or more. As though the tablets were evolving through the history of pharmacology, recapitulating drug development in miniature, progressing from a simple analgesic to complex therapeutic molecules on their own timeline. Inside sealed containers in a warehouse, and Lena reported her findings, and the warehouse's regulatory compliance officer reviewed the data and issued a directive to quarantine the entire lot and seal it in a secondary containment unit and restrict all access. And Lena was told that the lot was a contamination risk and that the anomalous results were attributable to container degradation, which they were not. And the lot was sealed in a steel container in the warehouse's restricted section, and the container was labeled with a biohazard designation and a date and the words, "Do not open," and Lena Vargas has not been permitted to access the restricted section since. But she has requested the temperature data from the secondary containment unit, and the temperature inside the steel container has been rising by 0.1 degrees per month, which is consistent with metabolic activity from a living system that is still growing. And the mass spectrometry data from the warehouse's air filtration system has detected trace quantities of compounds in the air near the restricted section that are not present anywhere else in the building. And the compounds are novel, and they are pharmacologically active, and they are in the air. And the pills are still sealed inside their steel container inside the restricted section, and they are still evolving. And they have been evolving since 1962, and they have progressed from a simple painkiller to a complex pharmacological organism that is breathing and metabolizing and generating new compounds that have never been seen before. And they were never supposed to be found, and they were found, and they are still in the warehouse, and the warehouse is still operating, and the restricted section is still E. Restricted, and the steel container is still sealed, and the pills are still breathing. And Lena Vargas goes to work every day and walks past the restricted section, and the air in that corridor smells different than it did 6 months ago, and it smells like a hospital. The specific olfactory signature of a pharmacy of active compounds in the air, of medication being manufactured, and the pills are manufacturing themselves inside a sealed container. And they are getting better at it, and the compounds they are producing are getting more sophisticated. And Lena does not know what they will produce next, but she knows it will be something that was not supposed to exist. The entire lot was never supposed to be found, and it was, and now it is making things, and the things it is making are in the air. Dr. Amir Khalil was 52 years old and a senior meteorologist with the National Weather Service, specializing in satellite imagery analysis and historical weather data archival. and he was conducting a routine quality control review of digitized satellite imagery from the GOES-6 satellite, stationary weather satellite that operated from 1983 to 1989. And he was examining a sequence of images from October 1987 over the central Pacific when he found the storm. A cyclonic system approximately 400 kilometers in diameter that appeared in a sequence of 17 satellite frames captured over a 6-hour period. And the storm was not present in any contemporary weather analysis from that date. No ship reported it, no aircraft encountered it, no coastal station recorded it, and Amir initially classified it as an image artifact. A processing error in the satellite scanning system, but the more he examined the images, the less they looked like an artifact. Because the storm had internal structure, a defined eye, organized banding, rotation, and the rotation was wrong. It was clockwise in the northern hemisphere where all cyclonic systems rotate counterclockwise. And the storm was moving against the prevailing upper-level wind, which is not how weather systems behave. And the cloud formations within the storm did not correspond to any known meteorological classification. They were too regular, too geometric, with straight edges. In right angles in places where atmospheric dynamics produce curves and spirals. And at the center of the eye, in the highest resolution frame, there was a shape that was not a cloud formation. It was a structure, three-dimensional geometric form visible in the satellite image as a shadow and a highlight, suggesting a physical object suspended in the atmosphere at the center of the rotating system. And the object was roughly triangular and approximately 2 kilometers on each side. And it was not moving with the storm. It was stationary. And the storm was rotating around it, and Amir enhanced the image, and the object had surface detail, lines and panels and what appeared to be openings or ports on its underside, and it was not a natural formation. It was built. Something had constructed an object and placed it in the atmosphere above the central Pacific, and the object was generating a weather system around itself. A camouflage of cloud and rotation and wind that made it look like a storm from a distance. And the satellite had photographed it. No one had noticed for 39 years, because no one had looked closely enough at a storm that rotated the wrong way in a place where no one was looking. And Amir continued through the satellite archive and found the same storm in the same location in 1984, 1985, and 1986. Always in October, always with the same reversed rotation, always with the same structure at the center of the eye, and the structure was identical in every image. It had not changed. It had not moved, it had not degraded, and Amir compiled his findings and submitted them to the NWS director's office, and the response was immediate and unusual. 2 individuals from an agency he did not recognize arrived at his office and reviewed the images and asked him specific questions about the resolution and the enhancement algorithms, and then asked him to delete his copies. Amir said these are federal weather records, and the individuals said these images have been reclassified. And the reclassification is retroactive, and Amir said, "You can't reclassify a hurricane," and one of the Amir's individuals said, "It's not a hurricane, that's the point." And they left with his hard drive and his printed copies and his notes. And Amir was told that the images were a known satellite calibration anomaly, and that his review was complete. And Amir Khalil has not been able to access the GOE-6 archive since that day because the security credentials for that dataset have been revoked. And he has not been able to stop thinking about the structure in the eye of the storm, because the storm was not weather, it was a mechanism. And the mechanism was designed to look like weather from a distance. And the structure at the center of it was designed to remain hidden inside the mechanism. And for 39 years it worked. No one found it because no one looks at a storm and thinks maybe the storm is a building, and no one looks at a hurricane and thinks maybe the hurricane is a door, and Amir Khalil looks at every satellite image he processes now and wonders how many other storms are not storms, and how many other weather systems are not weather, and whether the atmosphere above the ocean is full of structures hiding inside cyclones, rotating the wrong way, moving against the wind, waiting to be found. And the last thing the individual said before leaving Amir's office was, "You were never supposed to see that." And Amir said, "See what?" And the individual said exactly, and the door closed, and Amir Khalil sat alone in his office with no hard drive and no notes and no images, and only a memory of a triangle 2 kilometers wide, floating in the eye of a storm that was not a storm. The storm is still there. Because he checked the current satellite data for the Central Pacific in October, and there is a small cyclonic system in the same location with reversed rotation, and it is still there every October, rotating the wrong way, hiding the same thing at its center. And Amir is the only person alive who knows it is there, and he was never supposed to find it, and he found it. Now he checks the satellite every day, and the storm is always there, and the structure is always at the center, and it has not moved, and it has not changed, and it is still built into the sky. 10 things that were never supposed to be found. 10 people who found them anyway, not because they were looking, but because their jobs required them to look. And the things that were hidden so well that they became invisible by existing in plain sight. Inside walls, inside mailboxes, inside tunnels, inside tissue samples, inside cables, inside archives, inside storms. And letters from the future that a postal carrier delivered to a house that was waiting for residents who had not yet arrived. The painting of an event that had not happened yet, with a face in the corner that belonged to the woman who found it. The station between stations with passengers from a decade that had not arrived. The organism growing in formalin that only one person could see. The wall that was not holding up a building but holding something in. The school records for children who had not been born yet. The voice on the ocean floor that had been speaking for 58 years to no one. The boundary marker that moved itself to expand a dead man's land. The pills that evolved from painkillers into something breathing in a sealed container. The storm that was not weather, but a building hiding in the sky. All 10 of these were hidden. All 10 were found. And now you have found them too, which means the act of concealment has failed 10 times. And the things that were hidden know they are no longer alone, and the wall is still warm, and the pills are still breathing, the voice is still speaking, and the storm is still rotating the wrong way, and the marker is still moving, and the organism is still growing. And none of them have stopped just because someone found them. If anything, being found was the one thing they were waiting for. Subscribe to True Terror Files Official. We post every single night, and something is always being found. Drop a comment and tell me which of the 10 you would have walked away from before it was too late. And the next time you find something that was deliberately placed where no one would look, leave it there. Some things are hidden for your protection, not theirs. Good night. We'll see you in the dark.